one must imagine Sisyphus happy. This is how Albert Camus concludes his meditation on the absurd, and it's a statement so deceptively simple that it almost feels like a trap. How could a man condemned to such a futile task, a task that he knows will never end, be happy? How could any of us, burdened by the same Sisyphean struggle, find joy in the face of such unyielding absurdity? And yet, this is the heart of what absurdism teaches us, that the power of absurdity lies not in despair but in liberation. In the stark confrontation with the meaninglessness of life, we are not left powerless. In fact, we are confronted with a kind of power that we rarely recognize, a power that can transform how we live and how we relate to the world. What is absurdity, really? It's not just the recognition that life lacks inherent meaning. It's the collision between two forces: our insatiable hunger for meaning and the universe's refusal to provide it. You might call it a cosmic joke, but it's one in which we are both the punchline and the audience. And this joke, this absurdity, is far more powerful than we often give it credit for, precisely because it forces us to confront what we are doing with our lives. It forces us to ask, if the universe is silent, what will we say? If nothing matters, what will we choose to care about? This confrontation with absurdity is not a single moment of clarity. It's not a revelation that comes and goes. It's a constant tension, a recurring awakening to the fact that the things we chase, the goals we set, the roles we play, all of these are constructs we've built in an attempt to impose order on chaos. But what happens when we see through them? What happens when the scaffolding collapses and we're left standing in the rubble? For many, this realization feels like a kind of death. The death of certainty. The death of meaning. But what if it's a birth? The power of absurdity lies in its raw honesty. It doesn't sugarcoat existence. It doesn't promise a happy ending or a grand purpose. It merely says, this is what it is. Now what will you do? And this is where the true freedom begins. Because when you strip away the illusions, when you let go of the need for life to be anything other than what it is, you find yourself standing in a space of infinite possibility. If nothing inherently matters, then everything is up for grabs. If there is no preordained purpose, then you are free to create your own.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
But let's pause here. Let's ask a question that cuts deeper. If you were truly free, if no one told you what to value, what to pursue, what to believe, what kind of life would you live? Would it look anything like the life you're living now? Or is it possible that so much of what you do, so much of what you strive for, is not really yours at all? How much of your life has been shaped by external forces, by societal expectations, by cultural norms, by the voices of parents, teachers, friends? And how often do you stop to ask yourself whether these things truly align with who you are? This is the challenge absurdity poses. It asks us to take radical responsibility for our lives. It asks us to stop waiting for someone or something to hand us meaning on a silver platter. And this is terrifying, because it means there's no one to blame, no one to turn to, no one to absolve us of the weight of our choices. But it's also exhilarating, because it means that, for the first time, we can truly begin to live. Yet this freedom comes with a cost. To truly embrace absurdity, we must let go of our illusions. And some illusions are harder to let go of than others. The illusion of control, for example. How often do we convince ourselves that if we just work hard enough, plan carefully enough, we can shape the world to our liking? But the truth is, life is unpredictable. Tragedy strikes without warning. Plans fall apart. People we love disappear. And in the face of this chaos, we are powerless. But here's the paradox: it's in surrendering to this powerlessness that we find real power. When we stop clinging to the illusion of control, we open ourselves to the full spectrum of life, its beauty, its pain, its unpredictability. We stop trying to force life into a mold and begin to experience it as it is. And then there's the illusion of permanence. How often do we live as though we'll live forever? We put off our dreams, telling ourselves we'll get to them someday. We stay in situations that drain us, convincing ourselves that we'll find happiness later. But absurdity reminds us that there is no later. Life is fleeting. Everything we build, everything we love, will one day be gone. This is not a reason to despair, it's a reason to act. If life is short, then every moment matters. Not because it's leading to something greater, but because it's all we have. So what does it mean to live in the face of absurdity? It means refusing to turn away from the void. It means looking directly into the abyss and saying, "Yes, I see you, and I will live anyway." It means creating meaning not because we have to, but because we can. It means embracing the struggle, not as a means to an end, but as an end in itself. But let's not romanticize this. Living with absurdity is not easy. It requires courage. It requires resilience. It requires a willingness to fail, to fall, to struggle without guarantee of success. It requires us to accept that we are not heroes in some grand narrative, but ordinary beings trying to make sense of an extraordinary existence. And yet, it's in this ordinariness that we find something extraordinary. It's in the simple act of living, of choosing, of creating, that we defy the absurd. It's in our refusal to give up, our refusal to give in, that we find our strength. And then there's joy. Because absurdity is not just about struggle, it's also about freedom. The freedom to laugh at the absurdity of it all. The freedom to find beauty in the chaos. The freedom to live without waiting for permission. What absurdity offers us is not a solution, but a perspective. It's a reminder that life is neither inherently meaningful nor inherently meaningless, it just is. And in that isness there is space for everything, for pain and joy, for struggle and triumph, for despair and hope. So here's another question: what would it look like to live as though the struggle itself were enough? Not the destination, not the outcome, but the struggle. What would it look like to wake up each day and say, "I will push the boulder, not because I have to, but because I choose to"? This is the power of absurdity. It doesn't ask us to escape it. It doesn't ask us to conquer it. It simply asks us to live with it, to embrace it, to find freedom within it. And in doing so, it gives us something far greater than meaning. It gives us life. Imagine this: you're standing at the base of a mountain with no summit. You can push forward, you can climb, you can fall, but there is no peak to reach. Would you still climb? Would the act of ascending, the sweat, the wind in your face, the moments of exhaustion punctuated by fleeting views of beauty be enough? This is what absurdity asks of us. Not to find the summit, not to conquer the mountain, but to climb because we are here and the mountain is there. To live with absurdity is to live without answers. And for many of us, that is a terrifying prospect. We crave certainty the way we crave air. It gives us the illusion of stability in an unstable world. But here's the truth: certainty has always been an illusion. Life has never been certain. No matter how many plans we make, no matter how carefully we construct our lives, the ground beneath our feet is always shifting. The absurd forces us to see this, and in doing so, it liberates us from the need for answers. Because once we stop demanding that life provide us with meaning, we are free to create our own. But how do we do this? How do we create meaning in a world that refuses to give it to us? The answer, or rather, the lack of one, lies in how we choose to live. Camus suggests that the act of rebellion itself is enough. To wake up each day, to engage with life as it is, to refuse to bow to despair. This, in itself, is a form of victory. It's not about finding some grand purpose. It's about taking ownership of your life and living it on your terms. Let's make this practical. What does it mean to live on your terms? It means questioning the scripts you've been handed. It means asking yourself, whose life am I living? How much of what I do every day is truly mine? And how much of it is a reflection of what others expect from me? Are you pursuing a career because it's what you want, or because it's what society values? Are you in a relationship because it nourishes you, or because it's what you think you're supposed to do? These are not easy questions, and the answers may not come quickly. But the act of asking them is itself an act of rebellion against the absurd. It's a way of reclaiming your freedom. Here's the hard part: once you start asking these questions, you may realize that much of your life is not your own. You may realize that you've been living according to someone else's idea of what your life should be. And this realization can be devastating, but it can also be a turning point. Because once you see the chains, you can choose to break them. But breaking the chains is only the beginning. Freedom is not just about rejecting the old, it's about creating something new. And this is where absurdity becomes most powerful. If the universe refuses to give us meaning, then we are free to invent it. If life has no inherent purpose, then every moment is a blank canvas, waiting for us to paint it. This is not a burden, it's a gift. It means that your life can be whatever you choose to make it. It means that you are not bound by the past, by tradition, by what others expect of you. It means that you are free. But freedom is not easy. Freedom is terrifying. It means taking responsibility for your choices. It means owning your failures as well as your successes. It means accepting that there are no guarantees, that even if you live authentically, you may still stumble, you may still fall, you may still fail. But this, too, is the beauty of absurdity. Because in a meaningless universe, failure is no more significant than success. What matters is not the outcome, but the act of choosing, the act of living. And in this act of choosing, there is joy, not the fleeting, surface-level joy of distraction or consumption, but a deeper, more enduring joy. The joy of knowing that you are alive, that you are free, that you are creating your life moment by moment. This joy is not dependent on external circumstances. It doesn't require you to achieve anything or prove anything. It is simply the joy of being, of existing, of participating in the absurd dance of life. But let's not mistake this for naivety. Living with absurdity is not about ignoring the pain and suffering of life. It's not about pretending that everything is fine. It's about embracing life in its entirety, the joy and the sorrow, the beauty and the ugliness, the triumphs and the tragedies. It's about saying yes to all of it, not because it makes sense, but because it is. Here's another question. What if you stopped trying to fix your life and started living it? What if you stopped waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect job, the perfect relationship, and simply allowed yourself to be where you are, as you are? What if you stopped looking for meaning and started creating it? What if you stopped asking why and started asking how? How will I live today? How will I love? How will I create? How will I show up for the people I care about? These are the questions that absurdity invites us to ask, not because they have definitive answers, but because the act of asking them is what makes life worth living. In the face of absurdity, we often feel small, we feel insignificant. But what if our smallness is not a weakness, but a strength? What if the very fact that we are so tiny, so fleeting, so impermanent, is what makes our lives so precious? Think about it. If life were infinite, if we had all the time in the world, would anything really matter? Would we value anything if we knew we could have it forever? It's precisely because life is short, because everything is temporary, that every moment matters. Absurdity shows us this. It strips away the illusions of permanence and control and reveals the raw, unfiltered truth of existence. And in this truth there is beauty. So what does it mean to embrace absurdity? It means waking up each day and choosing to live, not because you have to, but because you can. It means recognizing that the boulder will always roll back down the hill and choosing to push it anyway, not out of obligation, but out of defiance. It means finding joy in the struggle, not because the struggle will lead to something greater, but because the struggle itself is enough. And this is where absurdity becomes transformative. Because once you stop looking for meaning, once you stop waiting for life to make sense, you begin to see the world in a new way. You begin to notice the small, ordinary moments that make life extraordinary: the laughter of a friend, the warmth of the sun on your skin, the taste of your favorite meal. These moments don't need to mean anything. They are enough, just as they are. Absurdity is not a problem to be solved. It is a reality to be lived, and in living it, we discover something profound: that life's lack of meaning is not a curse, but a blessing. It frees us from the need to conform, the need to perform, the need to be anything other than who we are. It gives us permission to live fully, to love deeply, to create boldly. It reminds us that life is not a question to be answered, but an experience to be lived. So let me leave you with this: if nothing matters, then everything matters. If life is absurd, then every moment is an act of rebellion against that absurdity. And in that rebellion we find our freedom. In that rebellion we find our joy. In that rebellion we find our lives. One must imagine Sisyphus not just happy, but alive, and so must we.